Greetings. This is the second in a series of Torah talks. These are the lectures that I wish I had heard before I began my rabbinic studies over 40 years ago. If I had heard these, things would have been much easier. This one is on blessings and prayer. Blessings and prayer that work. I knew as a young child that there was something to prayer which I could not explain. My parents belonged to a small Orthodox shul in the Boston area. We weren't Orthodox, but it was the closest place. We went. And in this synagogue, there were people who read from the prayer service. Some of them actually knew which page they were on. And if they didn't know what page they were on, there were some of them you could tap on the shoulder and say, this is the page we're on. There were very few people you didn't tap on the shoulder because they were really doing something. And then there was Mr. Gerwitz. Mr. Gerwitz dressed in black. He had a stanger. He stood on this amud and he rocked back and forth and he prayed to a different drummer. He didn't pay any attention to us. He was beyond somewhere. I didn't know what he was doing. I don't know how he did it, but I knew whatever it was real. And I was curious about it and remain curious even to this moment. I'm going to, in the next several minutes, according to this, 17 minutes and 30 seconds, do my best to explain to you the foundation of blessings and prayer and leave behind with you a discipline that works. A spiritual discipline that works. It begins with blessings. I've written two foundation statements up here. One says, no benefit without blessing. These are rabbinic statements. I didn't make them up. They're in the Talmud. No benefit without blessing. That one's easy. Your parents told you this. If you have something that someone did for you, an act of grace, you say thank you. That's the first part of the blessing, the thank you. The second part is more difficult, especially for progressive Jews. No prayer without a request. To have a prayer without a request is to use God's name in vain. Using God's name in vain is like saying, Borei Pri Agafen, without drinking wine. What did you say the blessing for? You just use God's in vain. To go through this entire discipline and not ask God for something. He says, well, why did you come here? He said, well, Mitch showed me how to do it, so I did it, but I don't have anything to ask for. He says, go away. I mean, surely there's got to be something you need. Yeah, but I don't believe that I can get that. Well, if you don't believe, why'd you come into my office? He says, it's very, very, very strange, these people who will pray and do lip service, but not expect anything in return. We begin with blessings. This is a great secret concerning blessings. It's far more than a thank you. A blessing is a way of making the invisible visible. We know we cannot see God. We know that God is beyond any given form. But that doesn't mean that we can't make God visible. Here's how it's done. Really, this is how it's done. It's in the Hasidic tradition. We know the opening words of a blessing are Baruch Atah, Adonai Eloheinu, Melech HaOlam. Blessed are you. Adonai is our God, sovereign of the universe, ruler or king of the universe, we usually translate it. But in deep Hasidic literature, the word Olam is understood with a different meaning. Ne'elam. A king who is hidden, a king who is invisible. And what happens when you say a blessing is you take a line of blessing and you throw it over the body of the divine as much as one can say such a thing. And so if I say Borei Pri Agafen, I throw across the Holy One a line that says, this is the one who creates the potential for grapes to ferment into wine. Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, bread. Who has created such a beautiful sunrise, who keeps the earth spinning, who has provided me the ability to stand up after I tie my shoes, who has clothed the naked, who has opened the eyes of the blind. And if I take blessing after blessing after blessing, and I throw it across the divine presence, and I do it from this perspective, this perspective, this perspective, this perspective, what I've done is I've wrapped the Holy One in blessings, and the Holy One becomes visible. You follow? The tradition says 100 blessings a day. 100 blessings a day. I mean, the Holy One then is not only visible, it's almost like you could walk over and embrace it. Wow. So that's what blessings do. Now, here's the second part. No prayer without a request. When you enter into the discipline of prayer, it is a given that you are in need of something. If you're not in need, don't bother. If you're not in need, you are in denial. Recognize it. Now, here is how one progresses from blessing to prayer. Here we have the words of blessing. Baruch atah, I have Hashem Eloheinu, Melech haolam. These are the words of blessing. These are the words of the Shema. Now, the Shema itself is not a prayer. The Shema itself is a meditation. Achievement of the Shema is a stage in the progress of prayer. But take a note of the way in which the Shema is written here. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. You notice the format? You have Baruch atah, it's against Shema Yisrael. Hashem Eloheinu, Hashem Eloheinu. You have Melech haolam, Hashem Echad. It's as if a blessing is from us towards the Holy One. We recognize that we are blessed through you. We acknowledge that Adonai, Yud He Vav He, is our God. And we see you at the moment as this sovereign who cannot be seen, who is invisible, or as ruler of the world. So that's from us towards the Holy One. This is from the Holy One back towards us. Moses says, what can you know of God? Shema Yisrael. It's imperative, not passive. Not blessed are you. Hear, Israel. And Israel here is in the singular. So Israel is your first name. What do you know? The same. Adonai is our God. But in this case, all I can tell you is this: Adonai is Echad, unique, a singularity. Now, how can we experience a singularity here in this world where everything is a duality? Well, we can. This is the format of prayer. Boy, I'm really good with video effects. We have a very strong foundation of blessings. Blessings is the foundation from which prayer springs. And imagine now that I want to voice a request to the Holy One. In order to do that, I have to make myself known to the Holy One, and I have to approach the Holy One and ask. There's some considerable degree to this, degree of exposure to this. The exposure is quite real. Think, a student wants to go to the principal to ask a request. The exposure is great. The student can't sit at home and ask. The student can't sit in the classroom and ask. The student has to ask the teacher for permission to go, goes through the corridors, goes through the hall monitor, to the reception office. From the reception office, finally stands in the office of the principal and then asks. Well, that is the model for prayer also. We begin on a foundation of blessings, except the exposure is greater. Imagine that the divine presence is that way only 10,000 miles. And I string out a tight wire, and I'm going to walk across that narrow bridge, that very, very narrow bridge towards the divine presence. From a foundation of blessings, where that wire is anchored now very firmly, to a comprehension of the divine presence, which is now wrapped in blessings, is quite a journey. I'm going to step out on that tight wire. How would I do that? I would do it with a balance beam. And the farther out I could put the weights, the easier it would be to maintain my balance and I could progress forward. Or a physical balance beam would be physical weights. But an emotional balance beam and a meditational balance beam, as I move out farther and farther, requires a little description. Notice here I put a Shema in the middle of a balance beam. To the left there's a way, to the right there's a way, and the fulcrum is a singularity. The only singularity we have is the point of balance between two extremes. So let's say I begin to move out, and I take an accounting of myself, and I say, Ribono Sh'Olam, what am I doing? What am I doing? I am so small. I am so tiny over against the size of the universe. I am so insignificant. I am like a puff of breath that disappears in the wind. That's one side. On the other hand, as tiny as I am, I can make an impact on this world, create ripples that go out forever and ever and ever. And that's the other side. And then I say, at this moment, I am not this, I am not this. I am somewhere along this balance beam, and I'm right here. And when I recognize that, I say, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And then I begin to move out farther down that wire. Farther still. Until I have a sense of moving into the presence of the divine, still quite far away. And I begin to recognize what I'm walking into. And I say, Yotzer Or Vore Hosha, you are the one who formed light, created darkness. Wow. You are the one who created all the powers, strong force, weak force, all the angelic powers. You are the one who rests in a cloud of wow. I mean, and if I violate anything you say, if I try to violate, let's say, the law of gravity, you'll come down on me like a ton of bricks. On the other hand, you also provide me with compassionate guidance through laws of Torah. If I should violate one of those, you're compassionate and you wait for me to return. You're like a loving parent who can scold on one hand and console on the other. And how do I experience you at this moment? How do I experience you at this moment? Neither the ton of bricks, neither absolute compassion. I'm somewhere along here, right here. And I find that point of balance. And I say, this is little me with this potential coming forward now towards your office, your presence, recognizing the greatness, Gevurah, on one side, the Yotze Or, the power of creation and compassion. And I find this point of balance. And there's a more profound Shema that begins to echo in a greater chamber. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And then I begin to step forward. And I find myself, as much as one can say such a thing, on the edge of a cliff. This is as far as I can get by my own reason. Everything I've said so far is reasonable. This is it. I am looking down, and it's a couple of thousand miles straight down. I am looking out, and the divine presence is many thousands of miles that way. But I have a request to make. I have a request. And my desire is to get as close to the divine presence as I can, to command attention, to be worthy of attention, and to voice that request. So I step off the cliff. I take a step forward. I put my feet together. Because when one is standing on nothing, one doesn't move very much. Some take 3 steps forward. Some take a step forward with each of the first 3 blessings. However you do it, you step forward. You push your presence forward, so you're standing on nothing. The exposure becomes absolute. And you say, you are blessed. I am I. Take note of me. If not for my own sake, then for the sake of my parents. I go all the way back to Abraham and Sarah. not only should you take note of me from my yichas, the generations from which I come, take note of me also from my potential, the things that I might yet do for you, that we might do together. Either way, please take note of me. As you are a shield to Abraham, a help to Sarah, please be a shield, a help to me. And then you begin to tremble. You are the one who brings life into being and takes life out of being. My exposure is absolute. There's no guarantee that I ever get back from this exposure. But my desire to voice my request is such that I take this risk. And as you move even closer, you overhear the songs the angels sing twice each and every day around the throne of glory. Holy, holy, holy is the God of all the forces of creation. The whole earth is full of this glory. And you dissolve into that. And that's where you stand. Then voice your request. Whatever the request is, beyond any reasonable hope of ever attaining it, voice it. Because it's not for you to know how the universe works. It doesn't work according to the limitations of your reason. It works. And then when awareness of the body returns, retreat. Bow if you like. It's hard not to. And walk backwards from the divine presence until finally you're seated firmly and securely back in this world. That's the discipline of prayer. It begins with blessings. The blessings make the Holy One visible. Once the Holy One is visible, and once you have a foundation of blessings, then one begins the process of exposure step by step, dissolving oneself into the divine presence, almost to the point of disappearing. With a request, the truth is, what you went there to ask for is likely not what you need. But it doesn't matter. When you get to that place, you're so wide open that the grace of God can flow into you without any barrier and begin to fill in all that is absent, so that for the moment at least, when you return bishalom, which means whole, W-H-O-L-E, as well as holy. And so we complete this Torah talk. I look forward to yet another in the months to come.